Well, welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God, killing characters, and lowering the egos of all the people at the table. I'm one of your hosts, Dungeon Master Mitch.
And I'm your other host, Dungeon Master John.
And today we have author Peter Welmerink joining us to talk about legendary weapons in your homebrew games. This is going to be a sweet episode. John, we had a really great time talking with Peter. And stay tuned for some more information on a contest to win some of Peter's books later on in the show. But John, before we do that, we have, of course, some 5-star reviews. The first one comes from Eclipse Wizard and is entitled, Don't You Dare Stop, 5 stars. Started listening in 2015, whoa, way back when, finally got around to giving a review. From world building, in-depth discussions, and helpful DM-nastics, it can't get much better. DM Mitch, DM Neil, and all the other hosts and guests really know and care what they talk about. Starting with 3.5 and now just buying 5e, their advice transcends all editions, ages, and DM experience. They've helped me with so many ideas and really make the creative juices flow. Where would the world be without the DM's blocks? Well, hopefully Eclipse Wizard will never have to know. Thank you so much for that review.
That was awesome. Our next review comes from Potato Hater, and it's entitled...
Awesome name.
Awesome name. The only podcast I can't listen to at work. And it says, I am subscribed to 70 podcasts, and I listen to all of them at work. Oh, man. This is the only podcast that I can't, because I get caught up in the host's stories and inspiration. I end up not doing any work. Instead, I get deeply inspired, and my mind races with the ideas for my own campaign. So I listen to it at home now. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Man, that's 70 podcasts and the only one he doesn't listen to at work. That's some high praise, John.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
pretty awesome. Thanks, Potato Hater. And the next one comes from D. Burneth and is entitled, Helped Me Get Back in the Saddle, 5 stars. I've been listening to this podcast for almost 4 years now, and I just recently reactivated my iTunes account. Oh, we got some similar stories going on here. Like the title says, this wonderful podcast helped me to get back into playing tabletop RPGs and jump right into the DM seat. I've been running a campaign for over a year now, awesome, and I couldn't have done it without you. My players and I thank you. Sincerely, The Kind DM. Wow,
Aww.
Thanks so much, The Kind DM. That's a interesting name to have, The Kind DM. Most DMs are like, I will crush you with a boulder. But this guy is The Kind DM. Thanks, Kind DM.
Those were awesome.
And with that, let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meats?
The flattened meat's back on the menu, boys.
Well, for the meat today, we have a special guest, a guest that I'm actually sitting at the table with in person because I consider him a good friend. We have Peter Welmerink, author of the Transport series, the Saga of Brachus Strawn, and co-author of Bedlam Unleashed, who he co-authored with Stephen L. Shrewsbury. Peter, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mitch.
We've been trying to get this going for quite a while now, but of course, life is busy.
Yeah.
But this moment's finally here, so now you get to sit down with me and John. And today we're going to be talking about legendary weapons, which, as we will hear, kind of ties into, not kind of, totally ties into your Saga of Brachus Strawn. Mm-hmm. But we'll hear more, obviously, about that when we start delving into the topic.
Awesome.
So before we start talking about all these cool legendary weapons, Peter, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, the fast and sweet. I'm a father of 3 boys and husband and happy to be alive and basically have been writing, I would just say, action-adventure material since I was a young kid. and got my first piece published in 1997, short story, and then from there just kept moving forward with that passion. Now I've got a couple books under my belt, and I keep putting it out there, promoting it, talking to people, doing different events and stuff, so just trying to get the word out and trying to get my written work out. So besides doing my day job.
Yeah, doing a lot of work getting your books out in the Grand Rapids area of Michigan especially.
Yeah.
You go to a lot of comic book shops around here.
And bookstores and try to get the word out that way. So got a huge fan base of 3 people. Yeah, baby. They're awesome, and they are so interested in hearing what's going on that they just make I don't care. It's just cool that somebody even wants to talk about my stuff. So that's fine.
We've shared a little bit about the names of your different series that you've worked on. Can you tell us a little bit, have you been working on anything specifically lately?
My Transport universe, which is kind of what I call a post-apocalyptic tale and series. It's after all the bad stuff has happened, we're rebuilding, moving forward. There's still some of the feral zombies and all sorts of stuff out there, but I'm still writing in that universe. I found that I kind of like it, and it inspires me to keep doing some stuff in there, but I'm also working on the second volume of Brachistron, because it's actually roughly like a 10-story piece, and the first book is basically, I think, 4 or 5 stories, and then the second volume will take you to the end when all the rest of the fun stuff happens. But still working on some other fantasy pieces here and there, and yeah, so there's more ideas than there is time to actually get all this stuff down, but always working on something.
And the Transport series takes place here in the Michigan area, which definitely is such a draw for people here when they're meeting you. And I remember when I was reading the first book, I was like, I know this place. That's so cool. Yep. I've driven past that. And
even though I have changed the city's look just a little bit.
As it should be changed a little bit.
And in that the story starts out in 2025, but I've changed up some stuff, but still people recognize these places and they go, oh, cool. Oh, what have you done here? And what's going on in this part of the neighborhood? And I say, well, why is that? And they say, well, because I live there. I want to know what's going to happen to me during the... It's like, you'll be okay, really. So,
could you write me into your book, please?
You know what? I've talked to people that have inspired me, and I've asked them, of course, it's like, could I put you in as a soldier or something or whatever? It's like, yeah, could you kill me in some sort of epic cool way? I went, really? So there's a couple guys that they'll be in there.
That's fantastic.
That's amazing. All right, so Peter, we have a surprise question for you today from DM Deadly Sprinkles. He's a silver Patreon dragon with us. The surprise question is, if you had to create a trinket for a character to have, what would you create and why would you give it to that character?
I think the trinket would be like having either a bone on your person that you've picked up or some fossilized bone. I don't know, does it make sense to be imbued with some sort of power? Or
sure,
it could be something strange like just having some sort of piece of bone that for some reason gives you healing powers, or in its death state it's keeping you, I don't know, could be a good luck charm, like a rabbit's foot.
Well, I feel like even just seeing whether maybe you have the bone, does the character always hold the bone? Does he have it in around his neck as a necklace? Because I feel like a bone is a strange thing to see a character playing with his hands, or just, especially if it's humanoid or something along those lines. It's definitely going to draw another, whether it's a PC or an NPC, it's definitely going to draw interest, and they're going to want to know what's the deal here.
Yeah, where it came from, why are you carrying this thing with you? And okay, this is old school, but I think of Tasselhoff Burrfoot from the Dragonlance series. He's one of the Dragonlance characters, and I could almost see him with a pouch, and he's got all these little trinkets in there. And
oh yeah, now you're making me think of just some character who has plenty of bones, and the whole point is that he has multiple trinkets, one from each of his kills or something along those lines. Yeah.
Or maybe one actually is something of importance, and he's carrying this thing around, and that's part of the story where somebody's after him for that. They know that, or it could be anything, ancestral bone that has some sort of significance, or it's a old bone from a witch or warlock.
And if it was an old bone from a witch or a warlock, you would imagine it would have some sort of magical properties, which would be cool is if the character, the PC, didn't even know it, and you reveal it later on.
It's like his grandma's pinky toe.
Yeah. It's important. I must keep it. It means so much to me.
It's the lucky one. It's my grandma's lucky pinky toe.
Which sounds creepy, but to the PC or the NPC, it doesn't have to be creepy to them. It can be very meaningful.
But then it could be that person's grandmother might have been some sort of person of power, or be it magical or whatnot, and there's something in that too.
It makes my knees ache when it's gonna rain.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Starts to vibrate and quiver when it's gonna rain or something.
That'd be great, because that's such a, it's funny, but it also is no way game breaking to even just at the beginning of the campaign say, here, take this magical pinky toe of your grandmother. It's gonna let you know whenever it's gonna rain. But especially if he grew up in a farming town, that magical artifact in no way game breaking would be amazing to that farming town. They'd be like, this grandma's pinky toe is great.
We need that thing. We need that thing.
Thanks, Peter, for that awesome answer. I had a lot of fun talking about that. And thank you, DM Deadly Sprinkles. Awesome question.
Grandma's pinky toe.
Grandma's pinky toe. All right, with that answer of Grandma's pinky toe, let's jump into the topic at hand that we came to talk about today, legendary weapons. So first off, I think it's important for us to establish when we're bringing up this idea of legendary weapons, what do we mean by a legendary weapons? Do we have any examples from literature, movies, comics, anything along those lines? What is a legendary weapon? What does it mean to be a legendary weapon to you?
To me, a legendary weapon is a weapon that's well known across the land or time and space, and it's something that's found or scribed in ancient tomes and dusty parchments, maybe boasted about by a one-eyed, one-armed drunken tavern braggart or some bronze-skinned, mightily thewed warrior. Probably has never touched a thing. But,
or seen it.
Yeah, or seen it. To me, it's something that, it's very well known. It's been written in books and whispered in ears, and so...
You could even flip that on its head, though, too, and say that it's 100% not well known, that maybe it's been forgotten, right?
Sure.
And it's written about, but it's written in, like you said, whispers. I think of whispers in a page kind of sense, that you just get little mentions of...
Is this thing real?
Yeah, and maybe in different stories, too, because maybe the scribes who were writing the story of this battle that was saved by this hero wielding this weapon, they were writing from a distance. Maybe in one scribe's perspective, he was at such a far distance, well, to him it looked like a sword, but someone else was closer and saw that it was a hammer, and so you get these different accounts given. So you can absolutely go one with everybody has heard of Lightning Caller, the sword that shoots out bolts of lightning from the sky, or you can go, well, what is this sword? And have your characters...
I thought it was a hammer.
Yeah, have your characters start to pick up little hints and be like, is this what they're talking about? Because that's a whole different weapon, or it's so vague it could be this weapon, or it couldn't be this weapon.
Right. Yep.
When I think of a legendary weapon, it needs to be a weapon where if you could look back in time and see the story of this weapon, it'd be a pretty good story. Either this weapon was wielded by the hero of the story or the villain of the story, or there was something in its past where
it's truly collectible.
Yeah.
some shenanigans happen. Either there was a king and he always held this. It doesn't necessarily have to have ever killed a person, as long as it has a great story.
Sure. Yep, exactly. Yep. No, I agree with that.
With royalty, I like that, handed down. And that would be 100% how it could be well known. Well, this has been in the family line of kings of this country for centuries now. It's always been there. But on the other side of that, it could also be the weapon that makes the hero. A legendary weapon in the hands of a farm boy might turn that farm boy into an amazing hero who just saves the galaxy with his laser sword, right?
Yeah. I was thinking Shazam there for a minute.
Are there any examples that we can think of from literature or movies or comics of weapons that kind of are the personification of what a legendary weapon is?
I grew up reading a lot of Fritz Lieber and Robert E. Howard, Michael Moorcock, who did like the Elric of Melna Bonet. Fritz Lieber did Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. Obviously, Robert E. Howard did Conan the Barbarian.
Yep.
But especially with Elric and even some of I read a lot of R.A. Salvatore's Dritz Duarden Dark Elf Drow material, and I know for a fact that he was really cool because he had a couple of scimitars, Icing Death and Twinkle. What I really liked about Salvatore's stuff is that his sword fights were so real. I mean, you could see the movement. So Dritz Duarden had some, I don't know if they were legendary as far as like people knew about them, but they were definitely, significant and obviously weapons that he used throughout his time. So
They're legendary now.
Yeah, that could definitely be the case. That if we're talking about bringing these into the D&D world, like perhaps these weapons don't have a backstory, but it's in the game that you will be playing, the campaign, that these weapons will become legendary. And we've talked a lot about it on the show, like having, if you want to have your world have cameos later down the lines, whether it's like PC in another campaign is reading a book and another PC from a campaign you played 3 years ago shows up in one of these books, like that's always something the players get excited about. You can do this with weapons as well. You can either have these weapons be spoken about in story from the tavern keep, like you were saying, Peter, or you can literally bring it back into the world, even thousands and tens of thousands years later.
Yeah, if you like playing the Forgotten Realms, I mean, you could almost have these things where it's like way beyond the time of Dritz, and maybe your PCs stumble upon these scimitars, and there's maybe they don't know the history, or maybe one of them knows the legend of Dritz. And
I love Forgotten Realms and I love Dritz, but off the top of my head, what are the names of those scimitars again?
Icing Death and Twinkle.
I didn't remember either of those off the top of my head, but if you introduced a scimitar named Twinkle into my world, I would not think this is Dritz Duarden's sword. I would think, oh, this DM is having a really good time naming these swords ridiculous.
Are you going to tickle me with that thing, or Twinkle? Yeah, I don't know.
But you twinkled me right in the heart.
Yes, now I die. We have Tolkien's Gandalf sword, the Glamdring.
Which is that?
That's the one that
Foehammer? As well as Sting,
Sting, and then there was a Orcrist,
Thorin's. Thorin's sword. But yeah, all three of those found in a cave. All of those characters recognized these are well-made swords, elven make, and they saw that Glamdring and Orcrist had names. Sting did not, and so Bilbo named it. That's a good example because Glamdring and Orcrist, right there, boom, they got these legendary swords. But what's the sword out of all of those three that to us as readers is the most well-known? It's Sting, the one that is short and more mundane than the others, and that's the one that through Bilbo and Frodo becomes the legendary weapon. So
Elric's sentient sword, Stormbringer, which actually was like an evil type of legendary weapon, I guess you could say, because it actually sucked the souls out of its victims. And it could be friend or foe. In fact, in one of the stories, Elric kills his friend, I think his name was Moonglum, which is kind of like Twinkle, Moonglum. He kills his friend with Stormbringer. I think Stormbringer like possesses him or something. And anyway, so kills his buddy, kills all his friends and family and everybody he knows, including his enemies. And I believe eventually it kills him.
That's very much like the sword Soul Taker from DC Comics that Katana has, which obviously it is a katana, that sword. But takes in the souls as well of whoever she's fighting. I believe in the comics she even has her husband in the sword, so there's even this relationship that she has with this sword. Speaking of intelligent items, though, this is one of the reasons you really wanted to talk about this comic. Can you tell us a little bit about Brachus Strawn and his intelligent weapon?
Sure. So Brachus Strawn is just a everyman. He's a husband and a father. He's got a crappy day job. He's the town executioner because mainly he's a big dude, but can't get any other job, so takes a job as a town executioner. But through his travels, as he runs afoul of a archmage that's not very nice, and the archmage is unhappy that the king of the land is basically slaughtering his people. It's like a witch hunt. So he grabs Brachus and says, well, you're going to do a bunch of missions for me to get these artifacts and other things so that I can, at some point, have enough of an arsenal of, legendary weapons of all different makes and models to put this king in his place, which is probably 6 feet under. But as Brachus travels, one of the things he comes across is this living vine that almost kind of like he rescues it, and what it does, it attaches itself to him, and they form like a symbiotic relationship, and the thing can elongate and shorten. It's got barbs, so it can do some damage. Also, it can has a little of that life essence sucking ability, so if Brachus is kind of down and out, it can, latch onto something and help him heal faster. It grabs onto something that's rather foul, and of course, Brachus feels it and ends up heaving his guts out. But
yeah, there's this connection whenever he's wielding it.
And then there's another point where he angers it, and it won't do a whole lot for him.
From what you've told me, it is an intelligent weapon.
Right.
And so this is where that is coming from. It doesn't sound like it speaks to him or anything, but it has a mind and will of its own, it sounds like.
Yep. Working with him, it senses what needs to be done and sometimes protects him and sometimes gets him into situations. It's of good alignment, though.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So with Brachus, he finds this weapon. Does this weapon have a backstory, or is it Brachus that is now making this into a legendary weapon?
I'd say that it's probably Brachus who's going to make it into a legendary weapon, because the whip starts out as it's in the hands of kind of a villainous character. And I think it senses Brack is of good intention and wants to help him, and knows that the only way that maybe Brock can succeed is by bonding with him. It sounds almost like Venom or Spider-Man. Yeah. And then there's some issue where it gets cut off from its world because it lived in like a green, like lush vegetation.
Yep, living vine, like you said. Yep.
And so it ends up getting cut off from that. So at first it's not real keen to be working with him, but then I think they both come to realize that they can only survive by working together. So and through these stories and their travels and the things as they pursue these artifacts, it'll become a Brachus and Clawgibber, which is the name of the whip, will become
I like that name.
Legendary. Clawgibber, where I came up with that, I don't know. And somebody said that sounds stupid. It's like, well, it can't be any worse than Twinkle. But no, anyway. And I don't want to offend any R.A. Salvatore fans, because I love everything he does. I don't care if the darn scimitar is named Twinkle.
So I've been reading the Wheel of Time series recently.
Okay.
And one of the really cool weapons in that is this sword, Kalendor, that's not actually a sword. There's this whole prophecy, and it's this sword enshrined in the biggest fortress of the land, and this person is going to be reborn, and to prove that it's him, he's going to go conquer this fortress and take this heavily guarded sword out of the ground, and he's the only one that can get through this magical barrier and get to the sword. So it's already this, everybody knows about this prophecy and this sword, so it's already legendary just because it's popular. Legendary by popular demand. And he goes in and draws this sword, and instead of it being this awesome sword to fight people, it's a catalyst for his magic. And so he can channel
interesting,
infinitely more power by holding this sword than he could by himself.
Cool. So I don't watch Game of Thrones, and I know that's probably a sin, but there's got to be, is there weapons in that or some?
There are, but I don't know, John. I can't think of any that actually have powers.
Ice?
But they're made of
the Valyrian steel.
Yeah, I guess so. They don't have powers, but they're made out of materials, some of them, that it's like, so there's the White Walkers. You're probably somewhat familiar with the Game of Thrones universe. So there's the White Walkers, and so there's certain weapons that are made of a certain material that are the only thing that can actually do damage to certain things.
Right.
But yeah, they don't.
I would describe them more as ancient weapons than legendary because they're not.
I think a big thing is like legendary weapons. It's very much up to the interpretation. Like, because really in that world, which is low fantasy, I would say that that's as legendary as weapons get. Like, So we talked a little about legendary weapons, what they are, examples of them, and let's talk about how do we introduce legendary weapons as DMs into our own stories. What are some ways that we can do this?
I think some of the probably simpler ways or more obvious is you find it in a dead warrior's hand or a dead hero's hand, or it's secretly traded in like a black market scenario, something like that.
Ooh, and they don't, in the black market scenario, they don't even know what it is that they have.
The guy hands them a cloth wrapped length of something, and it's got some weight to it and makes the character's hair stand up on end.
I could see an auction-like scene, and you go through, like, these people are bidding on these items, and it's like, 30,000 gold for that painting made by this famous artist that has been procured, 45,000 gold for this item. Then it comes, and, like, the auctioneer is even kind of just like, why are we even doing this one? And, like, pulls the cloth off of this item that kind of looks
like
dusty and dirty.
Crusty looking.
Still got the blood off it. He makes a comment like, did nobody even try to clean this thing?
Yes.
And nobody starts bidding on it. But yeah, you can, like, as the DM, say to your player, like, that hair that stands up on your arm, you, or maybe even at the beginning,
there's something about this.
You even could have, like, dropped little hints of this weapon and what it looks like. You've read through your entire life, your father read to you this story, and this weapon was described as this, and then they're just staring at it. That'd be a great way to introduce a weapon.
And then the joke's on you because it was a legendary painting of Death Rays the whole time.
Because it was a butter knife. I think also it obviously and this is probably cliche, but you find it in the cold, dark, dank cave, which is inhabited by nasty beasties that you gotta use it to fight your way out of, and maybe you find out a little bit about it as you're fighting your way through look, it cuts through stone, let's go this way.
So with Brockus, you said that the Archmage had it before.
The name of this segment of the story is Terror in the Trophy Room, and this being gets into that and kind of keeps the Archmage from getting into that. So the Archmage sends Brockus in to, figuring that, if he dies, and this person is actually carrying this other, like, normal, like, barbed whip, and then he's got Clawgibber, which I don't even think he realizes
what it does, because it's not helping him.
Yeah, so he uses that as a weapon, so.
Yeah, and that's a great thing you can do, especially if you're talking, like you said,
fight the villain for the weapon.
You get the boss at the end, and I mean, that's a way you can make that boss fight hard, is if that weapon is either not intelligent or it is fighting for the bad guy. That's how you can give your boss a lot more of different buffs and things like that. But then when they kill it, that weapon can be theirs. They can then fight with it, and they can even start uncovering what is the story behind this weapon. A boss battle is a perfect way to introduce a legendary weapon.
So I wrote this story into my campaign for my players. We're about to start it. And so there's a god or some ethereal being is going to ask them in their dreams to go down this pathway of the gods or pathway of the heroes. I got to figure out what I want to call it. But they start traveling, and there's other adventures going on. But they come to all these shrines, and at each shrine, there's a riddle or a puzzle, or they have to bring something there, and then a messenger from one, like an angel or a disciple of whoever shrine it is, comes and says they've completed it and hands them a mundane, like a stone or a stick or something, and gives it to them. And then I'm going to let my players decide whether they keep it or what they do with it, and then they're going to go through 7 of these, and then when they come back, when they go back into the town, there's this big archway. And as they pass through it, if they have one of these mundane items on them, it turns into a legendary weapon.
Cool. That's cool. It's like, it's hidden. Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that.
I mean, you also bring up, John, with that idea, the fact that if we're giving the PCs these legendary weapons. You can have it, like we've said, it can be a family heirloom, and so they can just start with this legendary weapon and begin the game with this. Or you can have it be a side quest, have it be something along the lines of like what you're saying, John, with your story, that they can do this as a side quest, or they go into that dungeon, they fight that big bad, and that's where they get this legendary weapon in the side quest. Or you can literally have this be the big thing that you're doing in the campaign. Your PCs are going out, searching out these legendary weapons so that they can become great heroes like those who wielded them before.
I must find the Master Sword.
One of my other ideas for actually how to introduce a legendary weapon into a game is after being swallowed by a Tarrasque.
Ooh.
You find it in its gut and you cut your way out.
Oh, man. Of course, the one weapon that can kill the Tarrasque would only be found inside the Tarrasque's belly, right?
Yeah. How cool is that?
I mean, that's a legendary story right there.
The Tarrasque knew that this weapon could kill it,
yeah.
so it swallowed it, knowing that, hey, no one's gonna, take me out, so I'll just, walk around invincible, and then it swallows the wrong person, and as they're swimming in the
That's
bile.
his downfall. Yep. Yeah, or the first hero who had the sword was like, I can now defeat the Tarrasque, and just got swallowed right away and just like acid disintegrated them. They did not win.
It's just some farmer with a legendary sword. I got this, guys.
As we've said, you can introduce these legendary weapons by having the plan be, I want to give these weapons to my PCs and have them have these weapons. Or another option is that you can have this be part of what the big bad has. I mean, the whole story, it's really like multiple weapons in one, but Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet, like, that's a story of a big bad with a big bad weapon that does some crazy stuff. And the point is all the heroes have to get together to take him down and get that weapon away from him. It could be that is what they're working towards. Not to get the weapon themselves, but to at least get it away from the big bad.
Right.
And the other thing that I was even just thinking is we've mentioned legendary weapons having stories, legends, right, around them. They can have poems and prophecies written, songs about them. One of the cool ideas here is that if you have an idea for a legendary weapon in your world, but you're like, it just doesn't
How do you
fit.
introduce it? Or,
Maybe you're like, it doesn't fit into the story that I'm doing right now. Well, how cool would it be is if you go into a tavern and you have a bard start reading a poem about this legendary weapon, and your players are like, well, that was kind of interesting, but totally doesn't make sense with what we're doing right now. Start moving on, keep playing the campaign. And then a year later, you start a different campaign, and that's one of the weapons that they find. To wait for that light bulb to like turn on in that player's head when they go, yeah, hold on.
Yep.
I remembered that poem that bard recited. This is that weapon. Holy cow. I think little things like that
tie the games together.
Yeah, Peter, as an author, like, I know you're well aware of it, but it's so amazing when authors like plant things early on that come back way later. And as a reader, you're like, oh, sweet. And then as a reader, you want to even go back to
Sometimes, you want to go back and
reread it because you're like, oh, what am I going to gain from it now?
Yep.
That's such a cool thing that you as a dungeon master can also do. Plant the seeds for something that can be later. And honestly, you could do this in multiple campaigns. And, oh, man, we keep hearing these stories about this cool hammer, but it's never going to show up, is it, DM? 3 stories from now it will be. And when it does, it's going to be awesome. And it's going to be a sword because those scribes were wrong.
And it's coming out of a Tarrasque.
You will find it in the belly of the Tarrasque when you think all hope is lost.
Now, just who is the one that's going to get eaten to go get it?
Who is the unlucky going to be lucky? Yes, exactly. All right, so we've talked a lot about legendary weapons. We've talked about how to introduce them into your story. Now, let's do some brainstorming on inspiration. Like, we've talked about legendary weapons from literature, from movies, all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about our ideas for some new legendary weapons that could be added into the worlds out there, the homebrew worlds that DMs are running. What are some ideas for some cool legendary weapons?
Mitch kind of mentioned something like this earlier, but I like the idea of a sword that gives its wielder, it just makes him into a sword master.
Oh.
Maybe it's a wizard, and when he's out of spells, or he's all of a sudden he's down on his luck, he can't use magic anymore. Somebody casts silence or something. He's like, well, time to pull out my legendary master sword.
Huh.
And then all of a sudden he's a level 10 sword fighter who can still kill them.
Nice.
I mean, imagine
hang on, let me tie up my robe first, and let's go.
I mean, imagine playing a character or having a DMing for a character who's playing a sword-wielding hero like that, but if their sword is lost, they lose all of their class skills, lose all of these awesome skills that they've acquired, and they go back to a level 1, 5 HP commoner. And maybe they don't change in appearance or anything, but it's kind of like that Amigo Montoya look. They look kind of just they don't look fancy, but when that powerful object, that sword is in their hands, they become the greatest.
He-Man, I have the power.
They become the greatest sword fighter in the world.
Yep.
And even along with that, if it's a well-known weapon, and we didn't talk about that, but doesn't that paint a target on that character's back?
Sure.
Right? Because it's everybody's going to want to get that sword from him. But that'd be so cool I would love to play a character. I love characters with flaws. I would love to play a character that it's if I lose this sword, I am worthless.
I like the idea of you change class while it's in your possession or something. What if it changes your race or something like that? Where it's kind of like the Queen Fiona thing in Shrek, where you're one thing, without it or with it, and then another thing without it or with it. You know what I'm saying? When it's on your person, you're whatever class or whatever you are, and then when you get a hold of it, it changes you maybe physically or so. Of course, that's would be a magical type thing, but
I've got 3 ideas from that, so I'm just going to spit them all out real quick. One, when you said changing class, I thought of, so there's this game called Bloodborne where each weapon has 2 forms, and so it will be a short sword, and then you'll press a button and it becomes the longest sword ever. You do a flick of the wrist, and it just doubles in length and it becomes amazing. I was thinking when you said changing class, wouldn't it be sweet if the weapon, maybe John, even to draw back from something you said, it's it starts as a stone, and whatever you think of, that's the weapon it becomes, and you gain those skills along with it. John, you brought this up before, but it was the sword that channeled magic. It didn't do something you would expect a sword to do. You could have a weapon like a dagger that the whole point is that it gives you shape-shifting abilities. The dagger, as far as the dagger goes, is totally a mundane dagger as far as dagger abilities go, but it can change you into whatever sort of race you want.
Right.
It's a great stealth weapon just to blend in.
The class thing, too, it can give you, well, again, it's probably typical, I got a dagger, so it's probably going to give me some sort of thief or stealth skill or something like that.
Yeah.
Of course, then you could play with that, though, too, and totally make it, they're going to think that it's going to give them, but it's going to make them, super clumsy.
Yep.
And maybe give them some bonuses elsewhere.
Yeah.
It knocks their dexterity down to next to nothing, and they're tripping all over the place. And
Absolutely.
Combining those 2 ideas Mitch just had with it giving you strength and changing your shape is just making me, he's going to hate this because he hates DC, but it's making me think of Shazam.
I don't hate DC, and I really like Shazam.
Not only are you a level 5 farmer, you're also a little kid that's playing through this adventure. And all of a sudden the bad guy steals your weapon, and it's just a 5-year-old standing there in front of the demons of eternity. Oh no.
The skies are red and they're swirling with demons and
Or John, to flip that scenario, you steal this legendary weapon from the bad guy, and that bad guy reverts to a 8-year-old boy who has a bad attitude problem. You're not going to... I mean, I got to hope that your PCs don't just kill this 8-year-old boy. I know I've met some players out there who would not care.
Such a spanking.
But really, I mean, I hope they wouldn't. I've certainly done things as a DM where it's like, oh, this is a clear moral quandary. The players won't do this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are awful. So one of the things that I thought of with legendary weapons is if you are going to grant them to your PCs from the get-go, maybe they don't start off. Obviously, you might not want to start them off with like these game-breaking weapons.
Right. There's got to be some limitations.
Yeah.
I think it's always interesting if there's some sort of drawback, and even if it's like the most powerful sword or battle axe or anything like that.
Maybe it takes its power from you and unleashes it, and so you get exhausted afterwards.
Lose a couple of years of your life or something like that, and maybe you don't realize it until later, where it's like,
Is that a gray hair you've got there?
You're looking pretty old, Steve.
Yeah. But one of the things I thought was that as you play, if you want to introduce these early on in your campaign, like there's nothing to say that these weapons don't either reveal their powers the more that they are used, or that they don't themselves level up or gain new powers. So you can kind of start out by giving your players these powers that you're like, yeah, this is sweet. They have some awesome powers. We have a group of players, and all of their swords that they have are these legendary connected swords, and each one, the blade ignites into this different element. So you have like an earth sword, an ice sword, a fire sword.
And when they put the tips together, they become a giant robot.
No. Don't cross the
sorry.
beams. Don't cross the streams, Peter. Don't cross the streams.
They become a giant robot.
Yes. Oh gosh, Power Rangers reference right there. Classic. But who's to say that they, you give them all at the beginning and they all have this sweet ability, but you're like, this is awesome. It gives them a severe boost, but it's not crazy that they're still going to come up against bads that are going to be hard to fight. Right. But then later on, you reach level 5, and oh my goodness, now they've developed more powers. Now when you take that ice sword and you drive it into the ground, 2 ice elementals come up and they guard your character as well. And as you develop, this sword also develops or reveals more powers to you. Especially like I keep going back to Brockus Strawn and his intelligent weapon, because it sounds like that's a little bit of what happens with him is, I don't know how to use this whip. Yep. Well, the whip knows how to use itself and will reveal itself when the time comes.
Yep.
Yeah.
It pulls them out of some hot spots. I do like the legendary weapon doesn't really manifest itself until you hit a certain level. Because also, too, if you hint at that in the game, the player is going to go, I got this weapon, it's not doing anything. I thought it was supposed to be cool, it's not. But you don't want to have them dispose of that thing. So you want to make sure that you keep hinting that there's something to come, and maybe as, like you said, they gain levels and gain skill, at some point this thing starts to really reveal itself to them. So that would be cool.
Yeah, you can be as subtle or as obvious with it as you want. You can be subtle and not have the sword be mundane looking, and we keep going back to swords. Have the hammer be mundane looking or whatever it is. Or you can have engraved on that hammer something along the lines of, this hammer, Earth Smasher, will only reveal its true power to those who are worthy. And that it can be a level 10 unlock or something along those lines. Because if you're a player and you read that on a hammer, I don't know the player that's going to go, I'm going to sell this at the market for 10 gold.
I had this idea. I took this from a video game and kind of manipulated it. But what if you had a crown that connected to some daggers, and then they just flew around telepathically doing what you want?
I like that.
That's cool.
And then a mirror shield that everything that hits the shield gets reflected. It just like if somebody's hand reaches in with like a sword, his hand reaches out with the sword and stabs back. Like if you shoot magic in, it comes back out.
Cool.
And then in counter to that, a shield that absorbs all things. Like, you know the move Bide in Pokemon? Where like you wait and take all the damage and then do it back double? So your character would just stop and like activate this shield. And for that whole round, everything that hits you, you would take all the damage. But then that next round, you do it all back double.
I'm, of course, thinking of the scene from the first Avengers where Captain America holds up his shield, Mjolnir comes down, hits it, and it releases a shockwave that knocks Thor and Iron Man, and Captain America is just standing there because, his shield absorbs it. And that's not what the shield is meant to do, but, I mean, that's what Black Panther's armor does in the new movie, is it absorbs that kinetic energy so that he can kind of release it out and make a shockwave effect against his enemies.
Some kind of weapon, a hammer or a dagger or something that makes two of you.
Ooh. Like, not an illusion, but legit two of you.
Yeah. And then, but until you sheath the dagger, and then there's only one of you again.
Can you send that double to do stuff for you? I mean, are they...
Yeah, is there like a distance that he disappears at, or does he have true feelings? Like, is he like,
hey, stand right here for me for a second?
Yeah, if I leave your side at 500 feet, I disappear. It's like, no, what is life?
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I went the same way, Peter. I was like, the clear, obvious thing is, two of me in battle, great combat advantage. But I think there's way more role-playing advantages to having a double of yourself.
But also, like the movie The Prestige.
Yes.
When you put the dagger back, which one of you lives? Or do you just, like, absorb all the thoughts you had?
Then do you fight over it? I was like, don't sheathe the dang thing. I'm not ready to go yet.
Do either of your persons know which one is real? And does your party know which one is real? There's going to be a lot of cool role-playing opportunities with that. All right, John, give us another one.
I got one more that I thought was really cool. You know how if you open a portal to another place, I always think about it like that edge would be infinitely sharp in between the two planes. Like the edge of that circle. Like if you open up a portal anywhere, what if somebody had a sword that was just a portal in the shape of that sword, and you're just swinging around an infinitely sharp dimension? Anything that goes through it normally would just end up in like the ethereal plane or somewhere else, but you're just literally chopping with an infinitely sharp sword, so it's going to go through anything.
You're reminding me of The Subtle Knife from Philip Pullman's The Subtle Knife book. Because that's very similar. The dagger is so sharp that he can literally cut through air and open up different worlds.
Wow. That was actually one of because I was thinking of different powers that the weapon might have, and that was one of them where it can open a portal, and it's either like a one-way type thing or a two-way, or it throws you into some unknown destination. So as a DM, you could possibly use that if you want to, throw your players into like either some other realm totally or world or
different
whatever.
Plane, whatever it is. Yep.
So
I would go further and delve deeper into that specific item and go, is it random? Which random makes it very scary for the players. And I would say that that's an item that's like, it's only in the most dire of need, because I could literally go from the frying pan into the fire and drop myself into a volcano.
Right.
Or, like Brachus Strawn's Living Whip, like, is it intelligent and it knows where it's going?
Right.
Which certainly, is it evil aligned? Is it good aligned?
Right.
Like, those are going to change. Like, is it trying to help or trying to hinder?
Exactly.
I just had this crazy idea. What if every time you kill an enemy with this sword that opens up a portal, it opens up a portal to where they were, like, exactly 1 year before they died or something. So like you got to get into like this bank vault, and this guy went in there, and you wait 1 year and then kill him, and now there's a portal into the bank vault.
I'm gonna wait till the head banker leaves the place, then I'm gonna whack him with this sword so that I'll be able to that's evil.
That is evil.
But what if they're from a different plane? Like a mind flayer shows up, and you're like, you know what? I've always wanted to go to the Illithid plane.
Okay, well, now you're just telling me that you don't stand for Mind Flayer rights, John, and I am not okay with that as a big fan of Mind Flayers.
Oh my gosh, this episode has been so fun. I just want to thank you so much, Peter, for coming and being on the show. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, where can they reach you?
They can look me up on Twitter, which is basically just at P Welmerink. That's P as in Peter, P Welmerink. Welmerink. I'm also on Facebook. You can just search Peter Welmerink. Yeah, and you can find my books on Amazon. That would be the main place. If you want to get a hold of me directly through email correspondence, that email address is pwelmerink@gmail.com, and basically you can pick up a signed copy of any of my material for a discount. So because at that point I feel that you're a friend and family member. So
Speaking of signed copies, Peter, and when this episode airs, everybody should head over to Twitter at DMS_block. We will be doing a contest, which all you have to do is follow us and retweet it, and you can win a signed copy of Brachus Strawn at a very discounted price of free, which is pretty awesome. So all you have to do is retweet that, and you will be entered into that contest.
and who knows, maybe I'll throw a couple little extras in there for you too.
Perfect. Like I said at the beginning, you are right local with me, and you will have a book gig coming up soon. So for any people in the Grand Rapids area, give a shout out.
Yeah, I'll be at the Comic Signal on Plainfield Avenue on July 14th with 3 other local West Michigan authors. So we'll be there from 11 till 3 or 4-ish. We'll have all our material there. I'll have Brachus Strawn and some other stuff there. So come down and stop by. And plus, it's a great store, the Comic Signal on Plainfield in Grand Rapids. Great place.
Amazing.
It's huge.
Amazing. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that episode on legendary weapons. We want to thank Peter once again for joining us on this episode of the Dungeon Masters Block. John, if our listeners would like to get in touch with us, maybe they have some stories about legendary weapons that they've put into their games or how they use them or anything else, where can they reach us at?
You guys can always email us at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com. Dungeonmasterblock, one word. And if you like our show, please feel free to give us a 5-star review on iTunes, and we'll read it out on the show like we did in this episode.
You can follow us on Twitter at DMS_block. That's at DMsBlock. And remember that we will be having, once this episode airs, a contest to win some of Peter's signed books. So get on there, follow DM's Block, and retweet to be able to be part of that contest. You can also, of course, like us on Facebook. Both of those places are great places to go to get updates about when episodes drop, what they're about, and just all around D&D goodness. We have a Patreon member shout-out of the week, and this week's Patreon member shout-out goes to
Clint Benish!
Thanks so much, Clint Benish. Clint is one of our bronze dragons on our Patreon page. Thanks for your support of our show. We greatly appreciate it.
The Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network. You guys should check out our other shows like Geek Wars, Detentions and Dragons, and Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, and more.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Dungeon Masters Block. Thanks for joining us here in the place that we talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God,
Killing characters,
and lowering the egos of all other people at the table. Your sign off. What do you want to say? do you just salute to a podcast?
See you later, guys.
And keep on dungeon mastering. John, you had something?
No. I was gonna say. Why I can't talk. I'm too excited.
Take a breath. You're good. I'm too excited.
Goodbye.